What's up, gamers? It's Tom and Magnolia here, and this is Gunnerkrigg Court, Chapter 65, Katurday.
Hey!
So this chapter is a bit of a break from Annie and all her troubles, and we just get to spend the day with Kat and what she gets up to.
So the court never set Kat up with another roommate after Annie moved out?
No, since everybody is assigned roommates, because Annie was moved off, then there was no need to assign somebody else for her dorm room, so at the moment she gets the whole apartment to herself.
Pretty good deal.
It is. I think all the kids get a pretty good deal this year round.
I felt that in this chapter we were kind of seeing that Kat has grown in some ways and that she's become sort of independent. Is that kind of what you were thinking of for her here?
I suppose so. Kat has always been sort of independent, but a lot of the work that she has been doing has involved Annie in the past. And recently, I kind of get the impression that a lot of the work that she's been doing lately has been separate from Annie, even though she's been bringing other people in and actually getting quite a bit of help with her work. But in this chapter is a chance for us to see exactly what she has been up to and how everybody is sort of helping chip in, but really how Kat is at the focus of all of it and how she is not only doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but also is the factor of bringing a lot of disparate parts together. And one of the things that Kat's able to provide here is that since she is now working with Tony, Annie is able to then use that opportunity to work with her dad as well. And so Annie's been invited into Kat's workshop because they're going to spend the day working on some stuff. And I do the usual trick here of Annie being in a very different color compared to the rest of her workshop, just because Annie really is kind of, I suppose in this sense, the interloper into the situation.
Well, it does seem like the more Kat becomes an expert on this sort of thing, there's not much that Annie can bring to it at this point.
Yeah, that's right. And in the past when Annie has helped, and she has still helped in her own way, she really is keeping out of Kat's way and letting her do her thing, really. And even in this role here, Annie is just here to help out a little bit. In the same way, I suppose, that Annie wouldn't expect Kat to help her with her dealings with the forest. Kat really doesn't need Annie's help with a lot of this stuff, but she's more than happy to have her here in the workshop with her.
And here Tony is saying something kind of insensitive, but I didn't get the impression that it was anything more than a very literal comment rather than an insult.
Yeah, that's right. That's all it is, really. It's just a comment that he has. But it does come across as insensitive. But before things get too awkward, we see the first couple of characters that we're going to be seeing throughout this chapter. And Juliet and Arthur come along because they are taking part in the activities today.
One thing that's interesting to notice is that Arthur is being directly involved in the design of, what he's going to become, which I think is a nice touch.
Yeah, during this process of designing Arthur's future body, of course the specifics are kept pretty vague, but I wanted to show that Arthur and Juliet were involved in the design stages of Arthur's body, but also that there is some privacy, I guess, given to some of the design to Arthur. So it's not that Juliet was fully in charge of exactly what Arthur is going to look like in the future. And that's kind of what's happening here in this page, in a jokey sort of way. There are elements to Arthur's design that are left up to Arthur himself. And after that, we see a couple of familiar faces. Robot and Shadow have come along, but of course Robot seems a bit different right now.
How far in advance do you think about how Robot is going to look with each stage of his journey here?
I planned out the different stages that we'd be seeing him, but when it comes to the physical design of what he looks like, I kind of keep that on the fly, and I like to design it as and when that appears in the comic, because I like to sort of keep it a bit natural and weird looking, and especially these interim versions of Robot where it's a very temporary stage, I can sort of be a bit freer about it. But when it comes to designing Robot here, and I guess a lot of some of the proto limbs that he's been given up to this point, and some of the structures and things that we see of his body, I designed them while very much keeping in mind that Kat would have constructed these things as temporary structures, which is why they only have very rudimentary fingers and very basic feet and stuff. And so I've always seen it as kind of a test rig, like a test run, before they put the time and effort into making a full set of articulated limbs and stuff. But just the fact that they are at the point here where they have constructed an entirely new type of technology and they have a robot that is able to stand and walk is a big step for them. And here we can see that they're happy with the work that has happened, and even Tony and Juliet and Arthur can see that what they have here is something pretty special. And I guess especially for Juliet and Arthur, they're very happy that their goal is in sight really at this point.
It's pretty interesting that Robot is always recognizable even though he changes sometimes drastically, and he hasn't even always had those green eyes, so you can't even say it's just the green eyes that show who he is. Is that something you keep in mind, or is it just that Robot's personality always seems to kind of shine through?
Yeah, with Robot I wanted to do a sort of Theseus's paradox kind of thing, that old story where if you have a boat that is replaced plank by plank? Is it still the same boat? And with Robot here, even though he's gone through so many changes, he is still the Robot from the beginning of the story. Although he has gone through character changes as well. I've always wanted to make sure that whenever we've transitioned from one version of Robot to another, I have spent a little time just to anchor the old Robot that we knew and love with the current one, you know. And kind of the same with Shadow as well. He's gone through a lot of changes, but I think Shadow, even though he's changed planes of existence, it's not nearly as dramatic a change as Robot has had. And of course, just like he has been right from the beginning, Robot is more than happy to help out. So we come to the end of the work that Kat and Tony and Juliet have been up to.
And here and in the next page, I wanted to ask you about this moment with Annie talking about her dad. And I think the thing that I wanted to ask you about is how we're seeing their relationship in small moments rather than very large redemptive moments. It seems more like they're just aiming to try to get to a normal place rather than some kind of large dramatic moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess what we're seeing is that the development of the relationship between Annie and Tony isn't going to be done in a series of, say, impassioned speeches and really big dramatic scenes between them. It is going to be a slow, bit-by-bit process, really, where they are sort of establishing a more normal relationship between the two of them. And all we're seeing here in this scene is one of those steps. But that is just a small detail, and because this is a chapter more focused on Kat, we get onto the next development that she's done, which is finally starting work on a computer, similar to the one that her mom has mentioned.
I remember a while ago I was rereading some of the old chapters where Anya was talking about the computer that she and her husband built together, and I had this moment where I realized, what if Kat had a computer like that and she could control it? And I mentioned it to you, and you were all coy about it, so I'm glad to see.
Yeah, it's been a long-term thing coming. I knew that Kat was going to be going down this road at some point, and here we are starting to see that.
It's pretty cool, I gotta say.
And she's using it and the arrow that Diego's made to run a little experiment of herself. Here she talks about how she's going to transfer ownership of Renard back to Annie. Because at this point, Renard is still technically under Kat's control.
So when she does it through the arrow, with the arrow, it just means like that the transfer is somehow running through the arrow.
Yeah, of course, she doesn't give the technical details, but she's just using the computer and these controllers here, which are very obviously Turbo Touch 360s.
Of course.
To run the transference through, and because the arrow is now a major component of her computer, then that is also going to be part of the transference. But despite Renard being very nervous about it, it's just completely painless and regular transference of ownership back to Annie. So for all intents and purposes, Renard is back under Annie's control.
So it's just because the arrow is already a device that kind of combines technology with etheric stuff?
That's right. And we've seen up till now that Kat has been able to integrate that sort of stuff and use that sort of Diego type technology in her work, which is how she was able to create the device that let her enter the ether when they were rescuing Jean, and how she was able to decrypt some of the mysteries that the robots had built into themselves. And so again, kind of like with Robot's body, what we're seeing here is the end result of, I guess, years of work of Kat researching and developing her own technology. But because we're only seeing the end result of it, like two people like Annie and Renard, it is just straight up magic, and so they jab at her a little bit about that. And then head on their way. And Kat's busy day continues with a little bit of helping out one of her friends on the way back. Margo has a problem with her laptop, and I guess this is the curse of any technically minded person with friends who might need their help once in a while.
I think I've been Margo in many situations, and now it's making me feel a little guilty.
Well, here specifically Margo has somehow contracted the Jurassic Park virus, so Kat's helping her out. At least Margo was using a Unix system, I suppose.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah. But when Kat finally gets up to her room, we see that Path, her attentive girlfriend, has realised that all that Kat's going to want to do that night is just relax and play some video games. And that is the end of that chapter. And this bonus page...
I didn't get it when it came out, I have to admit.
Yeah. Well, this was fun because it's just based on the really old style computer component catalogs that my dad used to get when I was a lot younger. And I was a bit worried doing this at first because it was such a niche and like obscure reference, or so I thought. But actually, this is one of the bonus pages that got the most like feedback and happy comments about out of all the bonus pages. Really, it seemed like a lot of people understood what I was going for here.
Well, if I can be honest, when the page went up, I was like, what are you thinking? What is this? But then I saw the comments that like really seemed to be like, yes, I'm so happy to see this. I remember this all the time. So I was the one who didn't get it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of interesting about it. It is a really weird piece of nostalgia that certainly I'd not thought of for a long time. And I'm not even sure how I came to doing it here, but when I did come to making this page, every picture of every item you see here is just a picture of some equipment that I found in my apartment at the time and, took a really high contrast picture of and altered it and stuff. Like some of these components are nothing really. There was a box bot that I made that was a very basic robot that could follow a sound sensor, and then there are some like battery compartments with the lid removed, or there's a doorbell chime in one of these. But it was just fun making up all the weird names for components that I guess what I was going for is that it is a document that really doesn't mean anything to anybody that is specifically interested in the content, which I guess that is pretty obvious, but this is like such a specific field that would be really right up Kat's alley. She would be shopping for a salted component lift or a reverse file hardener or laying down the extra dough for a reducer for her Toshi alternate. So all in all, a successful experiment.
Good.
And that's that. Come back again for chapter 66, Memories of the Worthless.
Thanks for listening.